The CEPR's newest RPN is about competition policy. Last week we talked to Greg and Christina about what the RPN hopes to achieve. Well, this week it's the first big conference, so if you sign up for it, what are you going to hear? Hello again, Christina.
Hello, Tim.
And Greg, welcome back.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here.
So we're discussing the conference, Christina, that you've been putting all the work in. At least that's what Greg says. Starts on the 17th. This is a really big topic. So what are you focusing on for the conference?
It is a big topic, but it is one that really needs attention being drawn to. I believe that there is a desperate need for integration and convergence of the perspective of antitrust with those of data protection and privacy. Increasingly in antitrust, of course, we're concerned and we worry about the market power of digital giants. And that endeavor is not complete, is not effective, unless we bring into that the perspective of data protection, privacy violations, because the two are very close. The market power that ultimately these big tech giants wield is supported and underpinned by their ability to collect enormous amounts of data. Vice versa, the data that they collect are a manifestation of that power. The degradation of the data protection standards that we suffer are a manifestation of that power. So until now, we proceeded on a sort of parallel track in which the antitrust people do their thing, they do market power, and then we delegate the data protection to data protection agencies. What has become clear is that we can no longer see these two as distinct. And when, as antitrust practitioners and scholars, we think about how to deal with market power, how to deal with the problems we face, we need to integrate that perspective. It's only if we actually pursue market power in the context of the data protection principles that we, I think, stand a chance to be effective. And vice versa, I think that the data protection pursuits that we entrust the data protection agencies with are very difficult to really make to work unless you have dealt with the market power. So it's a two-way street. The two need to just not intersect. It is an expression that you find commonly. We need to intersect market power or interface market power and antitrust with data protection. In reality, we need to integrate these two perspectives.
Greg, is that how you see the focus?
Yeah, very much. I mean, so, Christina has been very active engaging with the privacy and data protection experts on this topic. And as is symptomatic of the reason for this event, I'm sort of one step removed. But I think one of the whole goals of this event is to listen to what the privacy and data protection experts have to say, right? So we're trying to bring antitrust to the table to first and foremost, just listen. So now Christina and I wrote a paper actually with Johnny Ryan. So we've had sort of a first bite at this apple, and we've identified in that paper two sources of the problem, but I don't want you to think that that's all we think there is. I mean, the whole point of this event is to hear, do these two make sense to other people? Are there others? But let me tell you about these two, because I think they're really quite germane and fundamental to the lack of integration that Christina was talking about. So, I think the problem is that antitrust economists, both academics and within the agencies, are just comfortable with the canon, right? So they're comfortable with the models that they've used in the past. And in these models, lack of privacy, lack of data protection doesn't usually enter. And so what we saw in this paper with Christina, Johnny, and I was, look, how can we translate some of the issues that the privacy enforcers are worried about, or privacy experts are worried about, into the language that antitrust economists can understand? And here we saw two real things. The first is that the framing that antitrust economists largely use is that, okay, sure, privacy is a quality attribute, right? But that framing, we think, is terribly misplaced, because in the literature, there's usually an ambiguity. If a firm has more market power, they can offer more quality, or they can offer less quality. But all those models also have a price. So there's a price that these firms with market power are charging to consumers, and then quality can go up or down next to that. In digital markets, lack of privacy and lack of data protection is the price. That is the price you pay. And it's obvious that if you look at digital players, as they get more market power, they extract more data. They combine it with different data sets, they exploit it ever more. And so we think that the first sort of takeaway from privacy experts is that lack of privacy is a price, and it's time to treat it that way. Okay? It's even a little bit harder because, in fairness, because many players in digital space try to make it very difficult for consumers to understand what are the privacy policies, it's a little bit an unobservable price. And that further complicates things. It means some of the remedies that exist in the antitrust toolkit for high prices may not necessarily work. And in the privacy space, you may need to look for different tools, things like purpose use limitations, this kind of thing. Now, the second thing is that, so that's one, that's sort of just, and that lack of privacy as a price leads to exploitation. But it also, this lack of privacy can also foster foreclosure, exploitation and foreclosure. And the way to see that is that there's often a data element to these issues, data exploitation. And when you have data markets often can tip. There's often increasing returns, there's network externalities, and that, when these markets tip, that gives market power. Okay, but data is a little bit even worse than that. You get market power, but data also allows personalization. So with this personalization and market power, you get discrimination, right? So Tim, if you're a good customer, you get a good price. Me, I'm a bad customer, I get a bad price. And this exploitation takes us out of the realm of normal market power into discriminatory market power, where really firms with this kind of discriminatory power can really extract the value of users, whether it's consumers or whether third-party businesses in a platform environment. And then the third problem with this is that data is sort of a multi-purpose input. You can use it in one market, you can use it in another market. And if you're dominant in one market, you can basically favor your products in adjacent markets, adjacent complementary markets. So, and you can do this with bundling, or you can do it with increased compatibility with your dominant product. There's all kinds of ways. But so we think that taking these ideas of data in terms of it's a price and it can foster foreclosure, high prices and foreclosure are concepts that antitrust economists are used to. And so that's a first step down this road, but we're interested in hearing more at the panel about what other strategies might be out there.
Christina, give me a flavor of who's on the agenda for this.
The agenda is in two parts. There will be two panels in the event. The first panel is including a number of noted privacy and data protection scholar, commentators. Johnny Ryan, of course, is very well known as a leading figure in this space. Dina Srinivasan, Jason Kent. Alessandra Quisti is a noted academic economist who does pioneering work on value in privacy and measuring the value of privacy. And then we have an enforcer, Simeon Thornton from the CMA. In the first panel, we want to elicit the view of the privacy people. I often interface with privacy people, and the question that comes from them is, why is it that you people in the antitrust world do not see what we see? Why is it that you don't get to understand what worries us and you live in this silo? So the first part of the event, the first panel, is really intended to bring out of people with a real privacy data protection perspective how they see the problem and how they see the problem as interfacing with market power. The second part is a panel of leading regulators. We have the chair of the CMA in the UK, the chair of the Data Protection Agency, the chair of the German agency, the acting chair of the Federal Trade Commissions, and more, a number of leading regulators, and as well as the European Data Protection Supervisor himself. And the purpose of the second part is to bring the discussion in the first part into the antitrust arena, to discuss with antitrust leadership, how is it that we can integrate these data protection privacy views into the work that we do as antitrust people when we pursue a case, when we bring a case. How do we do that effectively? The occasion is also that there is a joint statement recently issued by the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK, together with the Data Protection Agency, ICO in the UK. They have issued a pioneering statement about 2 weeks ago about the need to indeed operate in a holistic, coordinated, integrated way. And so there will be attention to that statement, to the meaning and implications of that statement, but we will broaden the discussion to Germany, which has been pioneering in this space, to the US, to other countries, and bring in the perspective of enforcers.
Greg, it's a high-powered conference, which just shows how much there is to discuss, but some people who aren't intimate with what's going on in competition policy might be thinking, how on earth did we get to this point? I'd like to get both your point of view on why this problem even exists. Greg, start us off.
Sure. Well, I mean, so I'll come in from the academic side. And I mean, you'll notice that we have one academic on the panel, right? And that's symptomatic of the problem, is that the academics aren't working enough on this question. And we talked a little bit about this on our podcast last week. I mean, that the incentives have to be there, right? And the incentives have to be there for academics to engage. And that's one of the goals of the RPN, is to first to inform the academics, to make them aware what are the real issues that enforcers are facing, and then and at the same time give them hope that enforcers want to hear what they have to say, right? And so putting together this kind of high level panel will both hopefully open their minds and then give them encouragement that if they indeed work on this and get some insights, it can really have a real world impact. So from the academic side, that's how I see it.
We get to this because the traditional enforcement perspective is one in which we are concerned with market power. We address market power. And we try and do a reasonable job of that. But we have, as I said earlier, conventionally left the treatment of the data problem, which is part and parcel, we now see, of the market power problem, to the data protection agencies. The situation we're in today is incredibly dysfunctional in the sense that we have now allowed market power to develop to a point that it is very difficult for these fragmented, small, national level data protection agencies to deal effectively with the problems of data protection they face. So we are complaining that big law like the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is 3 years old, have been a failure. They are not a failure in the sense that the law is sound, but we have not enforced it. And the reason it hasn't been enforced is that we've allowed the data protection agencies to be alone fighting essentially tech giants with plastic knives. We have not dealt with the market power problem at the beginning. And it is only if we see these two together that we can try and deal with this in a sensible way. We got to this because we don't, as antitrust practitioners and economists, naturally think about this sort of important synergies, the important viewpoints that need to be seen and put together. And there is a vacuum there that really needs to be filled. We have seen it in high-profile deals. You know, I was very animated by the Google Fitbit event, in which, to my mind, there was a failure of the antitrust agencies to really see how the potential use of data for certain applications that were concerning was and had to be part and parcel of the assessment. So I think we got here, but we need to move the dial.
Greg, is this going to be one of those conferences where we go along the table and everyone says, I generally agree with Greg, or can we look forward to some interesting arguments?
I think we can look forward to some very interesting arguments and discussion, in part because, look, as Christina described when she was laying out the two panels, the first panel brings finally the privacy experts to the table in a room where there are plenty of antitrust economists listening. And so from that discussion, I'm sure we'll have a long list of issues that they think should be first order relevant in either a transaction or a conduct investigation. And then in the second panel, we're going to hear from the heads of agencies and other influential enforcers about what they're actually doing. Now, if those two things line up, I think we'll have broad agreement. But my very strong bet is those two things will not line up. And then we can have a discussion about, well, why don't they line up and where are the gaps? So I think there should be some animated conversation.
Christina, are events like these ones that you're going to have with the RPN, are they just talking shops, or are they really going to help to fix the problems that we have?
Well, the aspiration is that they're not going to be, of course, talking shop. The problem needs to be aired, and it is already quite a step to have an event that brings together these two perspectives. These things continue to operate in silo. All of the antitrust conferences you go to do not talk about this, and the privacy events that you talk to don't have antitrust people going to it. It is time that the privacy and the data protection people get a seat at the antitrust table. And it's only by getting these seat and getting this dialogue going that we can hope to move that dial. We don't intend this to be a one-off. For example, in the context of RPN, we intend to develop a series of workshops and discussions after this big flagship event in which we actually bring the antitrust economists in particular, those with an interest in antitrust policy, to the table to discuss in greater detail how do we now make this concrete? How do we move on? So I'm confident that this will be the beginning of something which has the potential to help along that path.
Well, Greg, not long to go now. For anyone who hasn't signed up yet and who thinks, I fancy watching this, how do they do it?
So very easily done. So the event is Thursday, June 17th from 3 to 6 London time, so 4 to 7 Central European time. You can get there many different ways. You can go to the CEPR events page. You can find that on your favorite search engine, or we've been advertising it significantly on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I think there will even be a link below this video. And so many opportunities to join us, and we hope you do. We think it'll be great.
We'll do our best to get as many people along as possible, but thanks for your help, Greg, and thank you, Christina, as well. To find out more about the Competition RPN and this week's conference, visit cepr.online/competition. And if you want to hear our podcast featuring Greg and Christina, visit voxeu.org/vox-talks. In the next few months, we'll be telling you more about CEPR's other research policy networks, so make sure you check back for those interviews as well.